Hit that like button as you come in. Say where you are watching from. June 10th, 2025 on a Tuesday. It is a Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to Cozy Corner TV. I am your host, Karen Smith. Call me Q, and we are on the corner. We're on the corner, y'all. So what is up, everybody? Um, all right, guys. So first up, got a couple clips to react to tonight. Not too long. I probably got I want to say 36 minutes of play. I'm gonna let most of it play through. Try not to comment too much on it just because we're saving that for Thursday night. Or we're on a little bit longer and a little bit later. But with that being said, we still got a couple of clips to get into tonight. So, as an advocate for mental health and wellness, I like to say make sure you're grounded and regulated before you digest this. Why? Because news can be triggering. If you're not grounded or regulated at the time, come back and watch this later. But if you are, welcome to the live stream. I'm going to jump right in as to what we're going to be watching. So first up on the menu, we got shout out to Fox News Philadelphia. Trump speaks on anti-ICE protests and military deployment to LA. So we're going to take a look at that. As you guys know, President Trump has had, I believe, the National Guard and the Marines deployed to Los Angeles due to the protests and the riots. Then we're going to switch gears and go over to Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to Bill. LA protest chaos, Trump wins AP ban ruling, and an ABC News scandal unfolds. We're probably going to go about 10, 13 minutes into what Bill's talking about. It's an over 20-minute clip, so we won't watch all of that, but we'll take a look at what he's saying there. Then we'll go over to Face the Nation. Shout out to them. Hegseth and Congresswoman clash over National Guard deployment to LA at House hearing. So we will be taking a look at that. Let's see, real quick. And then the last clip before the Christian clip, we got, shout out to Fox News clip, shameful, reckless, and irresponsible. LA officials called out for incentivizing hooligans. So we are going to take a look at what Fox News has to say about that. Then we're going to jump over to Cliff Buell. Shout out to Cliff Buell, Christian content creator. Title of his message today is, if Christianity is evil, then science is evil. We usually end the live stream every night with a clip from either Cliff Buell or another YouTube content creator that focuses on Christian content. So we'll end it tonight with Cliff talking about, in reference to a debate that he watched. Alright guys, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the first clip of the live stream. Trump speaks on anti-ICE protest military deployment to Los Angeles. Let's take a listen.
But if you want, we'll take a few questions.
Mr. President, will you invoke the Insurrection Act to deal with the situation in California?
If there's an insurrection, I would certainly invoke it. We'll see, but I can tell you last night was terrible. The night before that was terrible. We have, as you've seen, it was on most of your networks, people with big, heavy hammers pounding the concrete and pounding curbs, pounding it, breaking up all, and handing these big chunks of concrete to people. And they were taking their concrete, going up the bridges, and dropping it into the roof of a car. They were throwing it at our police. They were throwing it at our soldiers that are there. And we got it stopped, and we have them in custody right now. Look, if we didn't get involved, right now, Los Angeles would be burning, just like it was burning a number of months ago with all the houses.
What's up, guys? What's up? Thanks for stopping by. Guys. Do me a favor, hit that like button. Elements of Powers. What's up, bro? Thanks for stopping by. McBee, trust me. What's up? You need any help? Hey, man, I appreciate you guys asking that question and being by. Thanks for stopping by. I would not stream this. You're gonna get canceled. Nah, McBee, you don't have to worry about that. That's why mainly I react to the news. And I don't react to other people. Every now and then I'll bring other people on for us to look at, but most of the time I'm reacting to the news. So you don't have to worry about that. I deal with YouTube just fine in that area. And if they give me a copyright strike, I'm very good at getting them removed. So don't worry about that.
Los Angeles right now would be on fire. And we have it in great shape. We're not playing around.
How will you determine?
Things to restore. Crime time is back. I don't want to be bold.
Whether or not there is an insurrection.
Well, you take a look at what's happening. I mean, I could tell you there were certain areas of Los Angeles that you could have called it
Cool
an
Kid
insurrection.
69, shout out
It
to
was
you.
terrible. But these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers. They get money. And when you take a look at what they do, when they show up and everyone's saying, what's he doing? He's pounding the curbs. This one guy's pounding the curb, breaking the curb, and handing big pieces of granite, in some cases it's granite and concrete to other people, and they're running out with it, and then we watch the other people, and they try and throw it into the face of the soldiers, throw it into the face of the police, and they hurt some people very badly. They go up on bridges, they drop it down on the cars as the cars are moving. They're not breaking the curb because they're doing a demolition service.
I'm not gonna lie. When President Trump said that they're breaking the concrete and they're taking pieces of concrete and they're throwing it over like bypasses so they can hit the top of the cars, I was like, yeah, they're out of pocket. Like if they're doing stuff like that, that's wild. Like they're at the point now where, of course, they're gonna bring the military in if they're doing stuff like that. I mean, come on, man.
Breaking it to hand out to people as a weapon. It's bad stuff. I've never seen that before.
Mr. President, how soon do you want to see FEMA eliminated? And what's your message to the governors about how much more of an expense it's going to fall to states?
Yeah, well, it's not going to be so much the states. We're going to give out less money. We're going to give it out directly. It'll be from the president's office. We'll have somebody here. Could be Homeland Security, but we're going to give it out through a method where it's given out. As an example, I just gave out $71 million to a certain state. They were looking to do about 120. They were very happy with the 71 million. We did a little cutting.
They probably didn't expect to get that.
So we're going to do it much differently. We think after this, Christy, I'd say after the hurricane season, we'll
Yeah,
start
we're
facing
set
it.
up a FEMA council over the next couple of months. We'll be working on reforms and what FEMA will look like in the future as a different agency, as under the Department of Homeland Security, to the president's vision. And it will empower governors to go out and respond to emergency situations. And that what the president does best is to make sure that the taxpayers are only fulfilling the need to which is appropriate, and that people are responsible to respond to their own people closest to home. So
If a certain state, as an example, gets hit by a hurricane or tornado, that's what the governor should be able to handle it. And frankly, if they can't handle it, the aftermath, then maybe they shouldn't be governor.
Mr. President, when is the last time you spoke with governors?
A day ago. Called him up to tell him, gotta do a better job, he's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death. If we didn't send out the National Guard, and last time we gave a little additional help, Los Angeles would be burning right now. Los Angeles would be not a lot different than what you saw take place in California and Los Angeles just a little while ago. And you gotta remember, we have the Olympics coming. And we don't want people looking at Los Angeles like it would have been. It would have been bad. Last night they had total control. If we didn't have the military in there, the National Guard, and then we also sent in some Marines. We had some bad people. We have people, they look in your face and they spit right in your face. They're animals. And these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers. They're agitators. They're paid. Do you think somebody walks up to a curb and starts hammering pieces out, has all the equipment necessary, and starts handing it out to people to use as a weapon? These are paid insurrectionists or agitators or troublemakers. You can call it whatever you want. And we ended it, and we have in custody some very bad people. Some very bad people.
Mr. President.
Did you see the guy throwing the rocks at the police cars as they went by and crushing their windows and endangering our police? We're not going to let that happen,
Pardon me, Mr. President, on those Marines, Governor Newsom has described them as political pawns. I'm curious for your reaction to that and what you see as the Marines' role and what are their rules of engagement?
All I want is safety. I just want a safe area. Los Angeles was under siege until we got there. The police were unable to handle it. You can speak to the chief. He said it on television 3 nights ago. He said, this is more than we can handle. They said that. And the LA police, I know a lot of the police in LA, they're great people, but they're given instructions not to do this, not to do that.
And a lot of people are saying that the reason why we know it's bad is because, well, why didn't President Trump just invoke the National Guard? Like, why is the Marine Corps there? Well, one thing you have to know is that one, they're probably the two easiest branch for him to invoke. And on top of that, the Marine Corps, he doesn't need any special permission to send them, right? So when he said that he even deployed some of the Marines, that wasn't shocking to me at all. As being a part of the Marine Corps, one of the nicknames for the Marines is the president's own. So that branch of the military, you can essentially say it pretty much belongs to him. He can send them somewhere. He can deploy them someplace. He doesn't need permission to do that when it comes to the Marine Corps. So it made sense to me when he deployed them. It doesn't necessarily mean like there's civil war in America if he deploys them. Yeah, it's pretty serious, but they're also usually some of the first boots on the ground if it's not some type of special forces team. So it makes total sense. I mean, I would have been shocked if he would have sent like the Green Berets or something like that. That's not going to happen, but it's understandable sending some of the Marines out there.
But in this case, they were trying their best, they were not able to handle it, it was out of control. When we got there, and you have to remember, I've been here before, and I went right by every rule, and I waited for governors to say, send in the National Guard. They wouldn't do it, and they just wouldn't do it. It kept going on and on, got worse and worse. And in Minneapolis, that city was burning down 7 days, and I said, I don't care. The governor, who's a governor that just happened to be running for vice president, in total, you talk about an incompetent governor, he's an incompetent person. That he was picked, well, I was actually very happy he was picked for other reasons. But this guy wouldn't call the National Guard. And we ultimately just sent in the National Guard, we stopped it. But that was after 7 days. And I said to myself, if that stuff happens again, we've got to make faster decisions because they don't want to do it. The radical left, it's usually radical left and it's usually governors that are Democrat.
So there's an explanation right there. Some people are saying, oh, well, President Trump, he's just doing whatever he wants to do. It's like, no, he's not doing it. He literally just gave an explanation right there. Now, I've seen this before, but some people haven't heard President Trump speak to it to this effect. And he says that when he's talking about that 7-day riot in Minneapolis, he's just not saying the name, but we know that that's in reference to George Floyd. He goes, it went on for 7 days, and I waited for this governor to do something, and he just would not call the National Guard. Who's this governor at the time when these George Floyd riots were happening? Lo and behold, Kamala Harris's running mate. It was Tim Walz. So he's saying, I waited for him to ask for the National Guard to come in. He would not call them in, and this went on for 7 days. Minneapolis would have been burnt down. It was burning. And then we finally sent them in. Okay, so now you fast forward to his second term. He just said it. He said if this happens again, anything close to this happens again, in his mind, whatever, we can call it a light case of PTSD. But he's traumatized by Minneapolis, so he says, if this ever happens again, we have to make faster decisions because these governors, they're just not going to move. Okay, so now it takes place, we fast forward in LA. Who is the governor in LA? It's Gavin Newsom. He just said it. He said normally the extreme left liberals that are governors are usually the Democratic governors, and they give me the hardest time, right? Okay, so we see the LA protest. Gavin Newsom is not calling in the National Guard, right? President Trump's not going to sit. He's not going to sit and wait for the protest to happen for 4 more days or 3 more days or 6 more days, and then he's like, okay, now I'll do something. Because he just went through what happened in Minneapolis. So he's moving a lot faster. This is why when Gavin Newsom is making the claim, well, I didn't ask for the National Guard. What I would push back to his claim and say, well, were you ever going to ask for the National Guard, right? Because after 7 days, Minneapolis couldn't get it under control. Now we're talking about Los Angeles. We're not even talking about a small place like Minneapolis. And they couldn't get it together. So when were you going to ask for the National Guard? Was it going to be on day 4? Was it going to be when they finally started breaking statues, when they're burning buildings, police stations? Like what day was it going to be? This is the reason why President Trump moved the way he moved, and he's not waiting. Sebastian, shout out to you, bro. How you doing? Hit that like button for me, guys.
And they don't want to call them in. They don't want to save lives. They don't want to save property. They don't want to call them in. I don't know what it is. We sent them in, not early, we sent them in late as far as I'm concerned. But big problems, as you know, 3 nights ago, big problems were ensuing. If we didn't send in the National Guard quickly, right now, Los Angeles would be burning to the ground.
The Marines a lot of people think an escalatory step, though. These are guys who fight wars. Are you at all concerned that things could get out of hand with Marine?
You see what I mean? So the reporter right there just asked, he's like, the Marines, they're usually reserved for fighting wars. Okay, so they're reserved for fighting wars, and that's the reason why I spoke specifically to the Marine Corps, because I know, having been a part of that branch, once a Marine, always a Marine, right? Semper Fi. I know that people have this perspective about when the Marines are deployed. I can tell people, you could be more worried if Navy SEALs are deployed, but you probably wouldn't hear about that, right? Even Army SF probably wouldn't hear too much about that. This is why I went into the Marines. A nickname for them is the President's Own, right? So this reporter asked, Marines are usually reserved for fighting wars. Are you at all worried that things can get violently out of control with the Marines there? No, because President Trump can send them. The good thing about the Marines to him, or to any president for that matter, is that they don't need special permission to send them somewhere or to deploy them somewhere. He can just do that. So just because he did that, I don't think President Trump is foreseeing something violent happening in LA and now we're on like civil war on American soil. No, I just think he did that because he has the authority to deploy the Marines, and he doesn't want it to get out of control. He's not going to wait until it unfolds the way Minneapolis did. Not to say that it will, but we can see that he's saying, I wasn't even going to give it a chance to happen.
These are guys who fight wars. Are you at all concerned that things could get out of hand with Marines?
When I see people
American City?
throwing concrete into cars, when I see people, the kind of people that I saw on your network doing danger to the police and to the military and to the National Guard, no, it's okay. You start running out of people. When you have 2,000 people from a National Guard standpoint, we have a very big military. But the National Guard, they needed a little extra help. And we sent them a little, and we did a great job last night. We had
a little extra help, so he sent the Marines.
And flame and a lot of bad scenes, but it was pretty minor by comparison. This morning it's very calm.
Jim, Sebastian, don't forget to subscribe.
But they know if they go there, they're not going to get anywhere because we have the National Guard. They were backed it up with a number of Marines. Yeah.
Mr. President, do you agree with Governor Abbott's signing legislation to mandate 10 commandments in school classrooms?
Having to do with what?
Do Governor Abbott sign legislation to mandate displays of the 10 commandments in school classrooms? Do you support him?
I have to take a look at it. I'm going to have to look at it.
Well, National Guard being.
They asked about Governor Abbott. That's the governor of Texas, legislating the 10 Commandments to be in classrooms. So she's asking if President Trump knows anything about it or has any comments on it. He said he has to look into it. I saw that about 2 weeks
How long will
ago.
it be there until you think?
Until there's no danger. It's easy. Look, it's common sense. You ask me that question. When there's no danger, they'll leave. You would have had a horrible situation had I not sent them in. Horrible. They'd be reporting on a lot of death and a lot of destruction that's not going to take place. I think if you look, every night it got less and less. They were met with very strong force, the bad people, the bad, sick people that do what they do. But these are paid people in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases. And they really are, they're agitators.
I was wondering if you had any response to Mexican President Sheinbaum, who condemned the violence there. Have you been in touch with her at all?
Said what?
I was wondering if you had any response to what Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said.
What she said?
She condemned the violence in LA.
Oh, I do too.
Have you been in touch with her at all?
Well, you think I don't condemn it?
He said I do
condemn the
too.
violence in LA, ladies and gentlemen. But I also stopped the violence in LA. And by doing what I did, I stopped the violence in LA. And that would have been, I think, maybe I'd ask Christie to speak to that. That would have been an unbelievable tragedy. We would be talking, I don't know that would even be here right now. It would have been so bad and probably maybe be out there. I don't know, but Christie, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So in 2020, I was a governor of a neighboring state to Tim Walz and watched him let his city burn. And the president and I talked about this in the past, and he was not going to let that happen to another city and to another community where a bad governor made a bad decision. So Claudia Sheinbaum came out and encouraged more protests in LA, and I condemn her for that. She should not be encouraging violent protests that are going on. If people are allowed to peacefully protest, But the violence that we're seeing is not acceptable, and it's not going to happen in America. This president is standing up for the average American who wants to walk their child to school every day safely, run their small business, and provide for their families. That's the action that he's taking. He has every authority under the Constitution to send these National Guard under Title 10 into these communities and make sure that operations go smoothly, that law enforcement officers are protected, that they can continue to do their work without fear of being injured or killed or disrespected, and that they can go home to their families at night. So I'm incredibly proud of the president for activating the National Guard and for sending in these Marines, because these Marines are specifically trained to meet the need that we have on the ground in LA right now. And Governor Newsom has done a disservice to the state of California for many years. The people there should never elect him into a leadership position ever again. He
The
clearly
governor's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent. When it comes to his railroad that he's building, where it's like 30 times over budget, nobody's ever seen anything like it. Now it doesn't even go to San Francisco and LA, it's way short of it. After years of work and overruns like nobody's, those contractors are some of the wealthiest people in the world, I guarantee you that. Because that money goes to those contractors. They just did a number on the wallet of the people of California. That train, you should look at that train. That is the greatest, I've never seen cost overruns. I've seen cost overruns and great incompetence over my life. I've never seen anything like that.
Mr. President, these protests obviously started in reaction to these large-scale ICE operations.
Yeah, Polo, you're right. He did pardon the January 6th protesters. I can see why you said the hypocrisy is crazy, because, you know, these are protesters. And listen, I can see where it's coming from. There's going to be two sides of this, either way that we look at it, right? I like to be a balanced person. So you're going to have your people that say, well, January 6th, you know, though, for whatever reason, I'm not saying I agree with everything President Trump does. We know sometimes our president, he could be a little high to the left, right? That's no secret. But you have this group of people that are going to say, well, the January 6th rioters are patriots. I don't believe that, because January 6th wasn't a peaceful protest, right? They broke into the White House, they broke things, they destroyed things, and people got hurt. So it's very similar to what's happening in LA. The difference is that they're not breaking into the White House and they're not hurting government officials. So in these people's cases, I don't think that any of their cases would be dismissed or they would be pardoned. Now, they could be pardoned if a Democrat comes in office. I think that then it's possible, because if you think about why they're protesting because anti-ICE protests, right? So of course, if we get a liberal president in office on the Democratic side, there's a good chance that they will then turn around and do what President Trump did. Because a lot of people on the left were like, how are these people patriots and they broke into the White House and they destroyed property, right? But President Trump, and there were some other people who had a view of like, these people weren't so bad. I don't think the LA rioters are going to get the same type of grace, because what they're doing, right? They're breaking concrete and they're attacking cars with it, dropping it off of bypasses, hitting police cars with it. Granted, I agree with you. It does seem a little bit hypocritical if you think about January 6th, and he pardoned them based on the fact that they were being patriotic. And these people are not going to get that same type of grace. Not at all. I could already see that coming. If anything, I think they're going to get the total opposite. So the only way we would see the LA rioters pardoned, if they start to get like charges and things like that, it would probably be if we get a Democrat president in office. Before that, I really don't see it happening. Definitely not with Marco Rubio in place, Pete Hegseth, President Trump, Kash Patel. I just don't see it happening. So we'll see though.
Operations in Los Angeles. Should people expect to see similar operations in the rest of the country?
Yeah.
And will similar protests see
Yeah,
similar response?
as you know, we're moving murderers out of our country that were put here by Biden or the auto pen. The auto pen really did it. The people, whether it's Lisa Monaco or whoever operated the auto pen, these are criminals. People are criminals.
Yeah, I agree
Allowing
with you,
criminals
Polo.
into our country.
Polo, hit that like button for me. Subscribe.
And I don't think that Biden knew what the hell he was doing. I don't think he even knew about it. But when they opened up our borders for the whole world to come, and yeah, we're going to get them out. We're getting them out. We're starting to get acknowledgement from the courts that, you know, there's a system. They come in without courts and they go out there, they want trials and everything else. I think that's starting to work out now. Judges are starting to see what a terrible situation it is. Many of those people that you saw on television last night, are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden. And they want to stay. And we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America. And we're not going to let them stay. And this is the first, perhaps, of many, or perhaps, if we didn't attack this one very strongly, you'd have them all over the country. But I can inform the rest of the country that when they do it, if they do it, they're going to be met with equal or greater force than we met right here. We did a great job. The people, you, Christy, and Tom Holman, and all of the people, Pete Hegseth, all of the people involved did an amazing job. We stopped a disaster. And it looks like a planned disaster, this didn't just happen. They had weapons, they had tools, they had everything you needed. I mean, they were throwing iced water in bottles, in glass bottles, at officers and soldiers.
That's crazy.
You could not use the word insurrection, but you could also use the word, these are very dangerous people, they're bad people. They were met with heavy force and they folded. And they may be there a little bit tonight, they may be there a little bit, but it seems to be getting less and less because they're going there and they're met
in the
with
military.
a very heavy force. And if they weren't, you would have that city right now would be on fire. It would be burning down. The rest of it, what's left over. Because the other fire was started because they wouldn't allow water into LA. They wouldn't allow water into California because they had it all shifted out to the Pacific Ocean. And I turned it around.
Yeah, I agree with you, Polo.
I told them to do it in my first term.
I think that's why people are so upset
They didn't
too.
do it.
I know
They
that's
had
why they
COVID,
are.
And they didn't do it. And I told them to do it. We did it in the second. Now we have billions of gallons of water flowing down. But Newsom should have done this. He's an incompetent man and incompetent governor. Okay, any other questions?
Mr. President, any message to adversaries as the Army kicks off 250-year birthday celebration?
I just think it's amazing. We're gonna have a fantastic June 14th parade, Flag Day. It's gonna be an amazing day. We have tanks, we have planes, we have all sorts of things. And I think it's gonna be great. We're gonna celebrate our country for a change. Recently, as you know, with World War II, the victory of World War II, I called up France and they were celebrating the victory. Well, we helped them a lot, as you know. I don't have to get into that. But I called up other countries, they were all celebrating the victory. We're the only country that didn't celebrate the victory, and we're the one that won the war. If it wasn't for us that war, you would be speaking German right now, okay?
Oh my goodness.
We won the war, and you might be speaking Japanese too. I mean, you might be speaking.
Yeah, shout out to you,
combination of
Polo. To your last point, because I did see the last point you put up, but the current protests, in my opinion, are overall rejection of Trump's callous approach to immigration, going into neighborhoods and removing what, in a lot of cases, are hardworking people. Yeah, I know that's why people are so upset about it. I know it is. Ben Shapiro actually played something by him last night that I'm probably going to bring back up tomorrow. At that point, it'll probably be about a day or two that he posted it. But I thought he made a great point when he said, if people on the left don't agree with what President Trump is doing, a better way to say this is to say, hey, this is not a good way of using this source of power, right? Like, we're supposed to be focused on the people who are here and they have committed crimes, right? Maybe they have come in not legally and they have stayed, and on top of that, they've committed a crime. Those are the people we should be focused on. We shouldn't be focused on abuelitas and abuelos that are going to work, right? Grandparents and moms and dads that are not doing anything, and even the whole time they've been here, maybe the reason you can't find them is because they've never done anything, right? So they don't even have a criminal record. I thought Ben Shapiro did a good job on touching on that, right? Like, what is the focus here? Because you can't tell me that you're already done with all the criminals that are here. You've already caught all the people who have criminal records. That definitely isn't true. Not with the amount of people that have come in. So I know most people are getting upset because we've seen the videos, right, where you have the group of people saying, don't take the mom, right? Don't take the dad. Like, we've seen all of these videos out there. So I know that that's part of the reason why the protests are happening right now too. I agree with you. I do think it's more of a very anti-Trump protest. I'm not saying it's not anti-ICE, but I think it's much more anti-president.
We won the war, and we're the only country that didn't celebrate it. And we're going to be celebrating big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're gonna be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but, you know, this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, so we know that the president is able to do what he's doing with the Marine Corps. Like you said, the National Guard needed some help. And the way he offered help was he sent the Marines, and he's able to do that. The president's own. He doesn't need permission to do that. He's already condemned Karen Bass. He's already condemned Gavin Newsom. Listen, I don't hate Karen Bass. I do think some things she can improve on. You know, when President Trump first came into office and the fires were happening and he went to LA, she was in some type of news conference with him as well, and they lightly got into it. So I was able to see just in that meeting that this probably wasn't going to go well for her while President Trump was in place. I mean, they have to do better. You know, President Trump, he always calls them and he tells them things like that. They have to do better. And they don't understand what he means by that, because if they're Democratic officials, God forbid they want to work with a Republican, right? But this is why we see so much disarray on the Democratic side. You have to work with your government, period. President Trump is not the president of the Republicans. He's the president of the United States. So we'll keep up on the ICE protests, and I'll probably bring something tomorrow to see where they're at in that. All right, guys, so we're going to switch gears right now and go over to Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to Bill. We love Bill over here on the channel. LA protest chaos. Trump wins AP banning ruling, and ABC News scandal. So we'll go probably about 10 or 13 minutes into this, and then I want you guys to go over to Bill O'Reilly's channel and watch his video so he can get his due views. Let's take a listen.
No Spin News, Monday, June 9th, 2025. Stand up for your country. Well, the big story, of course, National Guard going to Los Angeles to quell the pro-migrant rallies or protests or anarchy. You can fill in your word. And it points up the growing, I didn't think it could get any worse, but it is, division in this country. But we have facts that you don't know about, and we are going to present them to you. And then we have Senator Ron Johnson on the big, beautiful bill. He doesn't think it's so beautiful. But there's another aspect to this bill that, again, nobody's reporting.
Nobody's talking about it.
So we have a lot for you, and the talking points is on LA. Okay, so ICE is deporting an enormous amount of people, mostly criminal, but not all. And they make mistakes, anybody would. Any organization would sweep up people that are harmless when you're going after hundreds of thousands of people. Remember, Joe Biden allowed 14 million foreign nationals into this country in 4 years unattended. 14 million. It is the worst policy decision in the history of this country.
This is why you shouldn't buy just one Mazzato knife. If you only buy one.
That's crazy. That's a little bit more than three. That's probably about 3 million a year? That's crazy.
There is no doubt about it. And we have researched this. We could not have researched it any further. The number is 14 million. Out of that 14 million, you feel if 10% of the population is evil, which it is, that's 1.4 million criminals or people of destruction. That's a lot of folks.
Oh, yeah.
So, ICE is all over the place, and the people on the left in Los Angeles don't like that. Los Angeles is a sanctuary city and county, very sympathetic to all migrants. Criminals, they won't cooperate. Gavin Newsom, the governor is in on that. Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, is in on that. They're the second most extreme on this issue in the country, next to Boston. Boston's the worst.
Yeah.
Okay. So Friday afternoon, a bunch of far-left people, Antifa, anarchists, and pro-migrant groups started to demonstrate, and they stopped traffic. 101, which is, you know, LA is the big artery there, tried to shut it down, set cars on fire. They did all of this. President Trump, okay, obviously getting reports, knows the state of California will not prosecute these people.
Yeah.
He knows that
Not Gavin
because
Newsom.
George Floyd riots proved it.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you are arrested for vandalism or looting or whatever in Los Angeles, you will not face state or local charges. Trump knows that.
Yeah.
He also knows that his base, the MAGA base, and 56% of the American people, all right, according to all the polls, don't want unfettered immigration. So he's got the majority on his side, and he decides to send in the National Guard. There's a January 6th component to this that I'll get to in a moment. So the Guard shows up, just 300 of them, not overwhelming force, but enough to cause all kinds of reaction from the far left. Now remember, there's looting going on, there's arson going on, and nobody is dead that we know of yet, okay? 56 total arrests, not that many, about 2,000 protesters, that's the estimated crowd. The LA Police Department itself declared an unlawful assembly. So this isn't Trump doing this is the local cops.
Right.
Trump sends them in, okay? But immediately, Gavin Newsom, who is running for president in 2028, seizes the opportunity to play to his base. Roll the tape.
He's a tough guy. Why doesn't he do that? He knows where to find me. But you know what? Let your hands off 4-year-old girls that are trying to get educated. Let your hands off these poor people who are just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes. Been here 10 years. The fear, the horror. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy.
And that would be great for Newsom if he got arrested. That's what he wants. He wants to be the left-wing martyr. And, you know, I don't know whether Trump knows that or not, but
I agree with Bill on
probably
that.
not wise to arrest the governor because there's no real charges.
Right.
Now, if Newsom were to go out there and do something, okay, but at this point, arresting Newsom helps Newsom. But what you need to know is Newsom is doing this so that he can elevate himself into position to be the nominee for the Democratic Party in 28. Okay. So at this point, we don't have much else, don't really know how this is going to evolve, all right, but we do know that the far left is hurting itself. So did I just contradict myself? No, because Newsom believes that he'll gain traction in his own personal quest. But most Americans don't like this, okay? Like Newsom doesn't need most Americans to get the nomination. Now here's our pal Maxine Waters, the radical left congresswoman out there. Go.
I mean, there's no reason to be here with the National Guard. The President of the United States is cruel, dishonorable human being who would just assume they shoot somebody down. But I don't want that to happen.
The protesters that are out there, thank you. Please keep protesting. Protest peacefully. But please keep protesting because Donald Trump wants one of two things. He either wants people to stay quiet, to cower, and just look the other way while he continues to overreach, and abuse his authority, or he wants us to overreact and give him license to continue the escalation.
Okay, so that was Senator Padilla, and then we have Maxine Waters. I think Maxine Waters is the most interesting when she says, there's no reason for the National Guard to be here. And it's like, come on, Maxine Waters. We know she can be far to the left. But if you have people breaking concrete and throwing it off of an overpass onto cars while people are traveling, I mean, there's no reason for that. If the local police are saying, hey, we need help because 2,000 people are that much out of control and this is no longer a peaceful protest. Now people are getting hurt. Now police officers are getting hurt. Now things are getting damaged so people can get hurt. There's no need for that. And this is where the far left, man, they give me every single time.
Okay, so that's the left-wing line on it. Now, January 6th. Now, you'll remember that Donald Trump, and this is on the record, this is not an opinion, the night before, on January 5th, alerted the National Guard they might be needed to protect the Capitol on January 6th.
That's true.
Okay, Kash Patel expedited that order. But Trump didn't have the authority, or so he believed as president, to order the guard to onto the grounds of the Capitol building. Nancy Pelosi did. Nancy Pelosi denies, she said, that the National Guard shouldn't be there. You will remember that her daughter, Alexandria, blew her up.
Yep.
Unintentionally, by just making a remark going, yeah, my mother didn't want that guard and wouldn't ask for it. You remember that. It's all on the record. Now Trump remembers it, because Trump, that hurt him on January 6th, hurt him a lot. So he wasn't going to make that mistake again. So coupled with his political benefit of ordering a guard out there, and it won't be a benefit if it escalates out of control, but I don't think it will. I could be wrong on that. But the January 6th component
I don't think it will be.
is right there, okay? So you need to consider the big picture, which is what we give you here on the No Spin News. No partisan blab.
Shout out to Bill
Okay,
O'Reilly.
and that's the memo. Okay, the House, as you know, on May 22nd, passed the spending bill by 215 to 214. 2 Republicans voted against it, Massey and Davidson
All
in
the
the House.
Democrats voted
All
against it.
Democrats voted against Trump's spending bill. Now, the Senate has it. There's a lot of trouble because conservative senators don't want this amount of spending. They don't want it too high. But if the bill fails, then automatically there are tax rises. We'll put them up on a full screen. I'll tell you for radio what it is. So the average individual tax.
It says the individual tax rate goes up an average 2.5%. So if we round that, we got about 3% on average. And 50% of deductions that are able to be used right now, they're actually going away.
What you and I pay for working will go up 2.5% automatically. But this is the most important thing. 50% of the deductions that we all file with the IRS go away, which rockets how much money Americans will pay to the government. It's not passed, it's nothing. That just kicks in if this bill goes down. If that happens, it'll likely a recession will follow. If the recession follows, then the Republicans will lose the midterm elections and Donald Trump will be doomed.
That'll be his
It's
legacy.
not just about spending. It's about holding power in America.
Hey guys, this is U.S. Senator John Ossoff in Georgia. And before you skip this ad, just hear me.
Bye, Ossoff.
Let's face it, the U.S. economy is under stress. National debt rising, trade war is YouTube.com. 6553. We have the commentary on the collect around Tennessee. Can you explain the Trump-Musk fiasco? I think Musk has a point. You know, I'm not taking sides. Yeah, if you read my column and you read my message, I explain it, Tony. There you go. Every part of it is explained. Colleen Kavanaugh, Killingsworth, Connecticut. You think Musk's attack on Trump is a sign of a possible run for president in the future? No, I do not.
Nope.
Not going to run for office.
Elon wasn't born here.
Born in South Africa, so he can't be president. Ron, unfortunately, this spat has diminished both of these fellows in my mind. Perhaps that was my fault for elevating them in the first place. You know, I respect opinions on the situation, but I don't really, not involved in it. This does not apply directly to you. Patricia, China's important. Same for Israel, Iran, America, and yes, World War III. Musk and Trump disagreement should remain between the two of them. Bigger problems exist. That's logical.
Yeah.
Lindy Tubby, North Las Vegas. You and your son did a stellar job representing the USA during the China trip. Thank you. The reason for this email, to please use whatever influence you have to convince the president to halt the food fight with Musk. No, I'm not going to get involved. I got important things to talk about with President Trump. I'm not getting involved with that. How would I do that? David Bryant, Seneca, South Carolina. Today, June 7th, 2025, President Trump ordered the National Guard into California as Commander-in-Chief. He should have done the same thing before January 6th.
He tried to.
I think he learned a lesson.
Yeah.
Joseph Bauman, Jefferson, Georgia. I watched your YouTube video on Christiane Amanpour. Think the left will ever come back to reality? No, I do not. I don't think you can get away. I think that Trump derangement stuff will stay with them forever.
All right, and right there, I'm gonna stop it, guys. So as far as I'm concerned, the Trump derangement syndrome, right? TDS. I think it'll leave when President Trump leaves. I think as long as President Trump is in office, he is causing the left to absolutely lose their mind. It's kind of like Ben Shapiro said yesterday. He said, is the left, are they high on their own supply? I couldn't help but laugh because based on some of the stuff we're seeing, I think it's a reasonable question to ask at this point. So I don't think that the TDS will be with them forever. I think when President Trump leaves office, the syndrome will subside. But as long as he's in place, I think that the people who have Trump derangement syndrome, they're gonna have it because he's driving them crazy. I think it's wise of Bill not to get in the middle of Elon and Trump. He knows both of them. So, you know, he says, why would I even get involved in that? I have other things to talk about. That's between them. So I can understand that. I thought it was a good question. I thought his response was good when someone asked, do you think the arguing between Musk and Trump is like a power play for Elon to run for president? Well, if you don't know that Elon was born in South Africa, then you would think he can run for president, but he actually can't. All right, guys, so we're going to switch gears and we're going to go to Face the Nation. Here up, we have Pete Hegseth, Mr. Hegseth, and Congresswoman clash over National Guard deployment to LA at House hearing. Let's take a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, I plan to ask you some budget questions about the following: the cost of the Qatar plane, where the money from the Army's parade is coming from, or the National Guard deployments to the border, where that funding is coming from. I honor and celebrate the United States Army, but I'd like to know how much this parade is going to cost. I have sent the department letters on several occasions on this, and I'm still waiting for a response. But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed. And that is the president's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we need the citizens of Minnesota request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard, who have worked on crowd control, they were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV, but this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief of Police to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles is absent a clear coordination, presents a significant logistical operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city," the end of his quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions, though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California, and how is it going to affect this budget?
How is that the current
Or
cost?
the budget we're currently serving under? How much are these deployments going to cost for both the Marines and the National Guard? And what training or duties are not taking place because of these deployments?
What do you know, guys? Somebody in the chat feels like they need attention. Here we go again. I support the current thing. Oh, gosh. Can I use racial slurs, please? I mean, as long as they're friendly, you can. If you say something stupid, I'm going to kick you out of the live stream.
Where in your limited budget, sir, are you gonna find, in the remainder of this fiscal year, are you gonna pull the money to cover these deployments? What holes are being created?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground. And also
Pete Hegseth. Dude, you gotta love this part about him. Like, he agrees with her and he says, yep, I remember that time. Yeah, when the governor that you support abandoned a police precinct while it was burning down. It's like shots fired.
allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
Limited time, I asked a budget
And they are
question.
being-
Could the secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe
Asked about
ICE
the budget.
agents should be allowed to be
Asked about the
safe in
budget.
doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LAPD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have
Chairman,
implemented.
If
The police chief said that she was overwhelmed,
If the secretary is
so
not
we
going to
helped.
ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important.
She is
What
mad.
training missions aren't happening, where are you pulling the money from, and how are you planning this in the moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time and I will yield it back to the chairman.
Have you heard about Ryoko Pro? This is the cutting-edge portable Wi-Fi hotspot that people wish they found out about soon.
Man, those ranking members get mad fast, don't they? Miss McCullen, listen.
Where are you pulling the
Miss
money
McCullen.
from, and how are you
And she
planning
is a
this in
ranking member.
moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them,
I guess the thing that made me frustrated about this clip was why was she even asking these questions to begin with? Like, I get the budgetary questions, but there's so much going on, and Pete Hegseth is talking to all of the facts and all of the reasons as to why this deployment happened, which is the Senate hearing. That's why he's there to begin with. So he's there to explain to them why this stuff happened. He's there to remind them how Tim Walz was so flippant when this thing began to happen, and he took so long to call in the National Guard that it went 7 days long, right? So we already saw President Trump talk to this and say, listen, he was never going to wait that long to let it happen again after Minneapolis. So I just think it's interesting to watch a ranking member react like this. But you know, she's willing to give back her time. She's so frustrated and mad at Pete Hegseth that she's like, you know what? If he's not going to answer directly what I want him to answer, then I yield back my time. I'm not going to say I haven't seen a ranking member or a member do this before. But usually they'll hear the person out, even if they don't like what they're saying, and then they'll make their little comments back, and then they'll say, you know, I yield back. But this woman is literally like, I don't want to hear anything else. And I know why, because he's talking about Tim Walz. He's on record talking bad about a Democratic politician, let's say, someone on the left, and she doesn't want to hear it. So she's like, you know what? Instead of you being able to even explain these things on a record, I'll just yield back my time. I thought that was extremely interesting. I mean, Pete Hegseth has been going through it in the Senate, but I thought that was very interesting coming from a ranking member. How she literally was willing to shut it down and not let him say anything just because he wouldn't talk to her budgetary points. These things should be red flags for us when we're looking at the left side, right? Because what's the problem? What agenda do you have at play that a person can't even explain why the president is making the moves that they're making, and you're bringing me to court for these very reasons? All right, guys. So we're gonna switch gears and go over to Fox News clips. Shameful, reckless, and irresponsible. LA officials called out for incentivizing hooligans. Let's take a listen.
Four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, former vice chief of staff of the Army, and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, spent a lot of his early years at Fort Bragg, and he's going to be with us as we watch this historic afternoon that is taking place there. General, always good to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining me. What are your thoughts on this use of National Guard, federalizing the National Guard in this situation? You hear that member of Congress saying this is nothing like what we saw in Minneapolis. She thinks it's not merited. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it necessarily you have to compare it to something else. Just deal with the current situation.
That's a good
and we've
point.
got the Los Angeles police chief telling us that his police were overwhelmed. And just that statement alone indicates the action is appropriate to bring in the National Guard to reinforce those police officers.
Exactly.
After all, this is a violent protest that's taking place, and the fact that we have political leaders looking at this and denying it is pretty shameful and actually reckless and irresponsible. Because, you know, when you act like that and you hear the comments the mayor and the governor are making it, and you know I'm apolitical in this, the reality is that they're incentivizing, you know, these hooligans that we see running around looting and throwing rocks and stones and Molotov cocktails at police. And if the police chief and his people cannot handle it, then by all means, let's bring in the forces that can. The people of Los Angeles deserve stability, security, and peace. And when their police cannot provide it, then the federal government should provide it.
Yep.
What about the use of 700 Marines who are at Seal Island right now training for a slightly different objective than they normally train for, and that is to protect federal buildings and to protect property and life in Los Angeles? Is that appropriate?
Yes, it is.
No, I think it is based on now a comparison. During the George Floyd riot, so to speak, federal buildings were under assault, and we witnessed that. And I think this is a precautionary measure to make certain that that doesn't take place, and also that the National Guard and the police are not providing a mission to as sentinels and guards of buildings when they actually have to deal with the hooligans directly themselves. And the National Guard and the police have arrest authority. According to federal laws, posse comitatus, the U.S. troops there would not have that arrest authority. So I also think it's appropriate because what they're trying to do is ease the burden on the National Guard and the police.
General, we're watching some of the demonstrations at Fort Bragg right now, and you'll be watching along with us as we see these demonstrations and then hear from the president. But I want to ask you a bigger picture question right now, if I may. Earlier today, President Trump spoke on the phone with Bret Baier, and here's what he said about the threat from Iran. He said, Iran is acting much differently in negotiations than it did just days ago, much more aggressive. It's surprising to me, said the president. It's disappointing, but we are set to meet again tomorrow and we'll see. And another sentiment that Iran is just stalling these negotiations so that they can get closer to having a nuclear weapon. Your thoughts on that as we watch this demonstration?
Yeah, that's probably true.
Well, many of the negotiators that are working for the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, were also involved in the negotiations with the Obama administration. What I find very interesting is the Obama administration began in 2013. They dragged the negotiations out for almost 2 years. But Obama people went in with the same conditions: dismantling a nuclear enterprise, dismantling a ballistic missiles to deliver them, stop the malign behavior in the region, stop state-sponsored terrorism, let us inspect anything. Within a matter of months, the Obama administration removed all of those conditions, and what do we get? We got enriched uranium is permissible, no dismantling of the nuclear program, and by 2030 you're allowed to have nuclear weapons. That is the JCPOA that the Trump administration walked out of. I believe the negotiators are playing hardball again with this administration, thinking that by dragging it out, two things will happen. One, they want to wear the administration down, but number two, they want to make certain that they're recovering their air defense systems that the Israelis destroyed back in October. And they're trying to, I believe they're willing to accept an air attack. The Ayatollah, I think that's where he's coming from, and he wants to reduce the impact of that as much as possible so he can recover after an air attack and still acquire that nuclear weapon. I believe that's where he personally is.
I bet you're right. And the loss of those air defenses made him especially vulnerable to his nuclear operations being attacked by Israel, which of course Israel would still like to see happen. And they believe that there's a window for that, given the lack of air defenses that you say they want to rebuild. So, General, thank you. You're going to stick around, which we really appreciate. Thank you very much, General.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, shout out to the General. What are the chances that Iran is stalling so they can actually come up with a nuclear weapon? I would say that those chances are pretty high. I would say that they're pretty high. And when he says that it's a shock, you know, the president said it was a shock that Iran is acting, if anything, more aggressively. It was a light shock to me, but not too much. Not too much. They haven't been very compliant. They haven't been very complicit. They're not being very helpful. President Trump has went on the record to say a couple of times, if Iran doesn't come to the table and they're not willing to agree, he's like, it's going to be bad for Iran. Bad things will happen when it comes to Iran. A lot of people are confused about this. Why such a small country? You know, the United States is such a big country. Listen, Iran is a country that if they have a nuke, it's not going to be good, okay? If they have a nuke, it's a good chance that the United States will have to let off a nuke. And we don't want that. So there's a reason why President Trump is saying that. And he doesn't want that to happen under his administration. We know that President Trump has went on record to say he wants to go out and be remembered as a peacemaker, right? So I said, okay, he has a little bit of the Jimmy Carter complex, right? He wants to be known for that. When Jimmy Carter was remembered, that was one of the leading themes that he had following him, was that he was a peacemaker. No, everyone didn't agree with everything he did or how he was as president. But that was a legacy he wanted to leave, and he managed to obtain it. President Trump is working on that now, so he doesn't want wars happening under him. He wants to go out and be known as a peacemaker, and I think that's why he's working so hard to try to get everyone to come to the table and stop the wars. All right, guys, so with that being said, we're on the last clip of the live stream. Shout out to Cliff Buell. Go check his channel out if you guys have a chance. Last name Buell.
This might be...
So we're going to take a listen to Cliff. Tonight's topic is, if Christianity is evil, then science is evil. So, best response to this atheist arguments. Let's take a listen.
This might be one of the biggest mic drop responses of any debate. Watch this.
Is think of a wicked action done by someone purely because they are a person of faith. Think of an evil thing said or an evil thing done that is only done because the person is religious. You've already thought of one.
I agree very much with Christopher Hitchens of many of the evils that he claims have been done in the name of God. But I've learned to distinguish between the greatness of God and the inexcusable evil that has been done by those professing his name. And so I do not deduce that God is not great and that religion poisons everything. After all, if I fail to distinguish between the genius of Einstein and the abuse of his science to create weapons of mass destruction, I might be tempted to say science is not great and technology poisons everything.
That's a good point.
This might be one of the biggest mic drop responses of any debate. Watch this.
The evils that he claims have been done in the name of God. But I've learned to distinguish between the greatness of God and the inexcusable evil that has been done by those professing his name.
So he's learned to distinguish between the greatness of God and the inexcusable evil that's done by those who profess his name. This happens often. I've had people in conversations say things to me like, well, you know Hitler talked about God, right? And you know it's in his diaries, right? You know Stalin mentioned something about God, and people will say things to me like, how do we know that these people weren't Christians? And I will lightly say to them, because of their actions, and in the same breath, we as Christians will look at that like their fruit, right? These people, there's no way that they could have known Jesus Christ on an intimate level and have done what they did to that many people. It's just impossible, right? These are, when we're talking about Hitler and Stalin, we're talking about some of the most evil, you know, when it comes to evil, right? Maybe we can even attribute some of the Roman Empire's behavior to how they acted when it came to like mass killings and torturous killings and how they did these things. There have been people that have said, we have to kill these people in the name of God. This is something that God will want us to do, right? Sometimes people will say, this is what Allah would want us to do, right? So we have to be careful when we're listening to people invoke the name of God or say the name of Jesus and profess that they follow and they believe in that, and their actions are totally 180 opposite of what they were talking about. We have to look at that as a red flag. I'm not saying that you want to necessarily say this person isn't a believer, because people are at different points in their walk with Jesus. Can somebody be walking with Jesus and be at a point where they are still sinning and they even enjoy it just a little bit? I would say sure, because it depends on where they're at in their walk. If they just started this journey, they're gonna have a lot of slipbacks, right? They're gonna have a lot of days when they're like, they don't feel worthy, or they feel like they've messed up, or they've done something wrong, because Christians just go through things like that in their walk with Christ. But when someone is saying that they believe, they profess, they love Jesus, and then in that same breath, they're willing to try to take out a population of people, and the same population that Jesus essentially came from, yeah, there's a problem there. And it wouldn't have to be just the Jews, it would be any group of people. We have to really examine that and take a look at that. And where this gets harder is when you're not familiar with the character of God. If you don't understand what God is like, what he thinks about certain things, how he views certain things, then it's much harder for you to judge this, and probably it's easier for you to try to look for a place of grace to put a Hitler or a Stalin. And I'm not saying that a person cannot be evil or do evil things and change. They can, but there's fruit with that, right? We see signs with that. One of the pastors that I follow out in California, he always says it to this effect. He'll say something like, if a person got hit by a bus, we would be able to tell that they got hit by a bus, right? Like, no one's gonna get hit by a bus and just be walking around like they're perfectly fine. So if you encounter Jesus, then people should be able to tell that you've encountered Jesus. There would be something different about you, right? There would be something to other people off about you, to Christians probably on point, right? But there would be something different. So when we see somebody saying that they love Jesus, they follow Jesus, they believe in God, and their behaviors don't mirror that, that has to be a little bit of a red flag for us. Sure, a person could be going through a hard time, but it depends on what this looks like. How long are they doing whatever they're doing? Is there anybody in their life? Is there any type of mentorship trying to help them past that? These men that we're talking about in particular, these men didn't have that. They had their own views, their own precepts, what they thought about things, and they carried them out. And at the same time, invoking the name of God and saying that, God would want a pure nation. God would want a one race nation, things like that. That's actually not true, because if that were the case, why would God have made so many different races, right? Why would the Gentiles have been grafted into something that was given to the Jews? So this is where we have to look at that like, okay, this might be a red flag. I want to look into this a little bit more. I want to push back, or I want to challenge this a little bit more. All right, guys, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream for tonight. We will be back on tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so tomorrow we should be on around somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, love yourselves, and love one another. Be peaceful. Peace.